Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new around here, my name is Candice. If you've been around for a while, I'm sorry, it's been a while since I've put up a video. You know, life, you go through transitional periods where things are just busier than others, and before you know it, you look at, the calendar and you're like, it's been how long since I've put a video up now? Oops. But all in God's timing, right? Today we are going to be talking about the cultural version of chasing our own dreams versus biblically, right? Getting God involved and giving him our dreams. What the differences between those look like, which one of course is better, and just diving into it. We're going to pray first. God, thank you so much for bringing me back for another video. I ask that this would be your video, not mine, that you would give me the words that you want me to speak to your people. And because you minister to me just as much as you minister to them through these videos, and I know there's always some sort of tidbit that comes up in these videos that I would have never thought to say myself, but you just kind of spew it out of my mouth, and it's beautiful. So I ask that you do that with this one, and that you would bless every single person listening to this video right now. In Jesus Christ's name. Okay, so ever since we were little kids, right? Culture, videos, all of the books and stories and everything always point to chasing after your own dreams, chasing after your desires, making them happen on your own terms, on your own timing, and all that jazz, right? If you look at the way culture does it, because culture kind of takes God out of the equation, right? And if you don't have God in the equation of your life, of your dreams, of what your future is going to be, then the only available source of making it happen or being responsible for it is now yourself, right? And so then in the culture's way of doing things, it's solely on your shoulders whether or not your dreams happen for you, right? It's only up to you. It's not up to anybody else. Sorry, guys. It's in your timing, and you just make it happen on your own terms. Now, of course, culture frames this as a healthy thing, as it's, beautiful to chase your own dreams, to make things happen the way you want them to follow the desires of your heart, right? But what isn't taken into consideration with that is the fact that our own desires and our own timing for things to happen isn't always the best, right? Like, if my life had gone exactly the way I had planned it when I was like 18, right? It would look very different than it does now, and I would not have been ready for the things that I thought I would have been ready for at specific times in my life. Like, things would have just gone very differently. Because when we're doing things in our own timing, we just don't take into consideration all the things that, God takes into consideration, right? So on the flip side of things, God, the whole biblical point of view, we're keeping God in the equation, right? Which means talking to God, telling him what our desires are, which of course he already knows what our dreams and desires are. Half the time he's put them there himself. Sometimes they're ones that we have that might not be totally healthy for us. It just depends on the situation. But when we talk to him about them, right, we then are being open in our communication with him, being honest with him, because that relationship with him is ultimately the foundation of our entire existence, really, as Christians, But we talk to him about our desires, we tell him about them, and in this view of things, instead of having to strive and make things ourselves and do it in our own timing, we then take that desire, right, and we give it to God. We take our own hands off of it, and we let God figure out the timing and and have all the responsibility involved in making it happen, and then he tells us, if there's anything specific we need to do to step forward in that scenario. Now, some people might look at this versus this and say, well, over here, I have all the control. I decide when I want to get married. I decide when I want to do this job. I decide, if I want to write a book or start a ministry or whatever else, and I make it happen when I'm ready to do it. I mean, you do. We have free will. God gave us free will, right? And if we choose to go the path of making things happen ourselves in our own timing, God will respect that. I mean, he will, take a step back and kind of watch us end up getting into our own mess from trying to do things ourselves our own way, And eventually when we turn back to him, then he'll help us figure things out. But when we choose to go this way, when we choose to take the control into our own hands, to not trust God with it, to just try and make it happen ourselves, a lot of times we get into trouble, right? Let's just give an example. So if you have a desire for marriage, right? It's a healthy desire, right? God designed marriage, so it's healthy to desire it, and he, has marriage in the plan for most people, right? So it's, a normal thing to desire, right? When we go this way, however, we are separating God from the equation and trying to make it happen ourselves, right? In our own timing. So we might strive, we might go out to all these new places, try to meet all these new people. We might do online dating and meet up and go on a million dates with a million different people, and then be disappointed when things aren't working out, or it's like you're unequally yoked and it's just not happening for you. You can end up with a lot of heartbreak, or a lot of getting to the point where you've decided in your plan for your life that you want to be with somebody by this specific age, which is totally arbitrary, by the way. But so you have this plan in your head, and so you decide, okay, well, if I don't meet anybody else better by this age, I'm just going to settle for this person. And then you end up in a marriage that's not, God's will for your life, and that person, God might have had somebody totally else for that person and somebody totally else for you who would have matched you much better. But I think when we go the way of doing it ourselves and cutting God out of the equation, right? Taking our free will in our own hands, taking control of the situations, a lot of the times we can get into trouble. We can get into scenarios that are not the greatest and not the healthiest, or are just not in the right timing, right? So it could be, you're dating and maybe this is your person, but in God's plan, you would be marrying them 4 years from now, when you've dealt with all of your mental health issues or trauma and you've healed from things and you're in a much healthier and more mature place and actually able to love that person better, right? When we take things into our own hands, it's a control thing, but there's also a lot of stress that comes along with it, a lot of extra effort, and we're putting all of the responsibility on our own shoulders, which, again, I've done both of these methods in my own life regarding different things, and I will say this method is incredibly stressful because it feels like the whole world's on your shoulders, and if it doesn't happen, you somehow failed, right? Which is just not the greatest feeling in the world. Compare that with taking that same desire, let's say for marriage, and going to God with it, right? So you go to God, you talk to God about, hey, God, I really desire to be married, or I desire to have this relationship. I want to experience what it's like so then I can understand more my relationship with you. You just talk to him about it. But with this method, you know that God has your back. You know that God knows what's best for you. You trust that his plan is better than your plan and that his timing is perfect and our timing, usually isn't. Because he sees all of the other scenarios involved. He knows all the circumstances. He knows exactly how long it's going to take you to get to the point in your walk with him where you're in a really good place with him. He knows how long it's going to take you to get to the point where you have healed from your trauma. He knows how long it's going to take you and what things you have to go through in order to be able to trust your future partner fully and to be able to do all the things you need to do, right? So he knows all of the extra circumstances, and he knows when that person's going to be ready, because that person might be ready at a different time, you know? They have other stuff that they're going through before they meet you, or before they end up with you, you know? Like, God knows all of the stuff. And so trusting him with the decision, right? And that involves letting go, right? God gave us free will. We have the choice to choose what we're going to do, right? We can choose to do it ourselves, or we can choose to give it to him and like actually open our hands, let it go, knowing that, okay, God might not have this happen for a while. God might ultimately say no, that thing that you desire is not in his plan for you. God might, you know, make it happen, but in a totally different timing, in a totally different way, with a totally different person than you would have, you know, gone for on your own path, right? But you know that God's got your back. God has the best in mind for you, even if that means ultimately that desire does not come to pass, right? Whatever that desire may be, of course. We're just using marriage because it's an easy one as an example. But when you let go, and I know that, okay, taking it, right, taking whatever desire it is, and actually opening your hand and giving it to God and like taking your hands back off of it is scary sometimes, right? It's not the easiest thing to do if you, you know, grew up where you were so used to trying to be self-sufficient, right? Like actually trusting that he's got it and you don't have to worry about it or do anything with it unless he tells you to. Like, it can be scary at first, right, to do that. But it is incredibly freeing and incredibly liberating in a way, because then you know that it's now in God's hands. So you don't have to stress about it. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to be up at night thinking about the 12 different circumstances and how you could possibly be making this come together yourself and, you know, stressing over all the stuff, right? You just sit back, you put it in God's hands, and you let him work, right? And he does his best work, of course, when we let go. Because he's a gentleman. He gave us free will. I've talked about this in multiple videos. He's not going to trample upon our free will, right? So if we choose to, after giving it to him, we choose to go and snatch it back, he'll take his hands right back off of it and let us do that, right? We have free will. We can choose to take it back after giving it to him. It usually doesn't turn out very well if we do so, but we do have the option, right, to do that. But when we actually just give it to him and trust him with it, things turn out so much better, right? Because that's when he can work. That's when he can go, okay, I'm ready to bless you, but I'm going to work a little bit of this first, work a little bit of that out of you. Maybe I got to have you learn a few things so you'll be ready for this desire when I make it happen, you know? And sometimes his plan is different. And it's like, okay, well, this desire that you have is not exactly what's going to be best for you, but I've got so much more planned for you over here that I am ready to give you. I just need you to trust me and follow me and walk through this, right? And even if the desire you have is something that is not in God's plan, right? When you give it to him, you are also trusting in the fact that if it's not in his plan, he'll help you not desire it anymore, right? And kind of let it go. And he'll give you something that's even greater and better and more perfect for you than what you thought you wanted to begin with, right? Now, of course, this scenario over here involving God and everything is totally countercultural, right? Culture is all about self, the idol of self, really, and making things happen yourself. And if it doesn't happen, you failed, and it's all on your own shoulders and yourself, right? In this sort of scenario, it's a surrender, it's a letting go. It is trusting that God is higher than yourself and he can make things happen way better than you ever could. It's a humble knowing that you could not make it happen yourself. Knowing that if you did it, you're probably going to mess it up. Like, and I've done this myself too, right? I've had moments, I've talked about them here on videos, you know, like when I first got out of college and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do all the things and get the job and make it happen, right? And so I was over here striving my butt off and it just wasn't working out, right? It was a mess. I was stressed out. It was just, right? But when I finally was like, okay, I can't do this by myself. Like, just finally getting to that place where you're like, okay, this is beyond my capabilities to do myself. I can't do it without God's help. So then you turn over here and you go, okay, God, here's the thing. I'm giving it to you. I am taking my hands off and I'm going to let you work, right? And he goes to work. He really does. He's amazing. He loves us so much and he wants what's best for us. And when we finally do give him that control and just like take our own hands off of it, he does amazing things. And so like I said with before, when I did the whole right after college, going for the job, all this stuff, it was a hot mess when I was doing it in my own strength. It was just not working out, right? I gave it to God and boom, he worked and bam, I had a job. Like, it was literally 24 hours after not even 24 hours after giving it to God, where poosh, it happened. You know, God works in amazing ways, and I think the biggest thing that is preventing a lot of us from experiencing more of his blessings and, you know, experiencing more of his love is our free will, right? Our free will and our tendency to want to turn to doing things ourselves, our tendency to want to rely on ourselves or to trust only ourselves. Like, we have just like this inner flesh struggle, right? Of surrendering to God seems a little scary, or it seems like, well, what if he says no to what I want, and what I really want is over here, so I'm going to try and make it happen myself, you know? Like, surrendering to him, it seems so hard, right? It's something our flesh really struggles with, I think, up until you get to the point where you've been with God for so long and you've gone through doing it the wrong way probably like 12 times until you're like, okay, I think I finally learned my lesson and you do it better, God, so I am going to let you do it. You know? And this isn't to say that, you know, when we do give things to God, all of a sudden, you know, we don't have to do anything. It just kind of happens. Now, sometimes that is the case. You know, sometimes God completely arranges things in his own way. But sometimes he will prompt us to make a step. Like, he'll get things together on his end, right? But then we will have to make a step of faith by either applying for that job, right? Or accepting it when it's offered, or, you know, stepping out in faith and saying yes to an opportunity, or, you know, starting to write the book when he gives you the prompting to write it, you know, whatever the case may be of whatever desire it is, right? He might tell us to, you know, say something or do something, and then it's up to us to choose to follow what he says or not, right? So there might be steps that he does have us take in the accomplishing of making the desire happen, but ultimately giving it to him makes it so easy, so much easier than it is to try and do things by ourselves, right? Because his ways are higher than ours. He knows the perfect timing for these things to happen, right? Like, he knows the perfect time for us to get a certain job. He knows the perfect time for us to move to a different place. He knows the perfect time for us to tackle that hobby project, whatever that we've really been wanting to do. He knows the perfect time for a relationship to develop, or, you know, things to happen for you to have kids, whatever the case may be. He knows the best time. And when we leave it to his timing, and then we watch it unfold in his timing. Like, I think it's just so cool. Like, when we watch it unfold the way he wants it to unfold, we see all of these little blessings and how it just kind of all comes together perfectly, smoothly, like, just beautifully, really. And then we know, yeah, that was totally from you, God. It was totally from you. Like, it wasn't me. That, and then we can't take credit for it too. That's the nice part, is when we give it to him, he gets all the credit and all the glory for it, and it wasn't like a we did it ourselves sort of a thing, which is nice. When we give those desires to him, of course, God will say, might, make it happen. He might tell you something. He might say, yes, that desire will happen, but not for a while. He might say, no, that desire is not going to happen. And that's something that I think a lot of people are nervous about, and why they don't want to give their desires to him in the first place, on the off chance he might say no. But if he does happen to say no, he's got things that are so much better just waiting for us on the other side of actually laying down ourselves and like laying down our lives and letting him take control of it. And those things are going to be so much better than what you thought you wanted to begin with. I ought to know, like, again, when I was young, I thought I wanted specific things at specific times of my life. And I thought, by such and such an age, I'll have this. By such and such an age, I'll be doing that, And now looking back on, the past decade and a half, like where I was, what I thought I wanted at those ages, and what actually happened at those ages were totally different. Like, everything that was on my plan for what I thought was going to happen at a certain time didn't happen. Like, God took that plan over and was like, yeah, that's not what's best for you, right? So there were a lot of things that God said no to. There were a lot of things that God was like, okay, this might happen, but it's not going to happen in the timing you think it's going to happen. Or this is going to happen, but it's not going to happen in a way you think it's going to happen. And he shifted things and made things different. And as I look back, I see his hand in everything, right? I can see why he had certain things be postponed, right? Like, I can see, okay, well, if this had happened here in this timeline, I wouldn't have been ready for it, right? I would have messed it up because I would not have had the skills and the tools I needed to make it work, like, and he knew that, right? Which is why he pushed it to later. So he had me go through different scenarios where I learned skills and things and learned lessons that I needed to learn. Come on, all of us do, right? And then when he did finally pull things together, I was ready. And it was the perfect timing for it, right? And it works out great. And so when we just like let him do it, like, it's so much better. But it's ultimately up to us. It is our free will that is ultimately the deciding factor. It's, will we choose to let God take control of our dreams and our desires and fulfill them in his way, if he chooses to? Or are we going to try and make them happen on our own, strive and stress and just try and make it happen because we want it, and then end up potentially regretting it later because it wasn't in the right timing, or it wasn't what God actually wanted for us, or we got it what we wanted but then realized, oh, this isn't as great as I thought it was going to be. I kind of don't really want what I thought I wanted, like when we get through all those scenarios. Yeah, all of that just to say that I think if we choose to let God have control over these things, if we choose to let God pick our dreams, if we choose to let God make our dreams happen, if we choose to give him the control and let him decide when things are going to happen, it turns out so much better than trying to do it ourselves and having the responsibility on his shoulders, and he could hold all that responsibility and not, like stress out and crash and burn under it. But giving him all of that responsibility enables us to experience peace and joy. And even if you don't know exactly what's happening next in your story, and you're just kind of waiting on God to figure out what he wants to do, like you can still have peace in that. Whereas if you're trying to make it happen yourself and you're like, oh, but this isn't happening, I don't know what I'm going to do next, then all the stress and all the responsibilities on your own shoulders, So I guess my encouragement is just to take whatever desires or dreams you are currently hoping for, wishing for, those things that, just kind of get to you inside your chest. You really hope that they would happen, or you really want them to happen. And instead of trying to make it happen yourself, I challenge you to sit down at God's feet and to literally take your hands off of it and give it to him. Because when you trust him with it and you let him work on it and you let him make the decisions and you just let him do his thing, you end up so much better off in life and just so much happier, so much more peaceful, so much more joyful, and things work out beautifully, exactly the way they're meant to. Because when we let God make his plan happen in our lives, it's ultimately the best plan for us. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.